I'm gonna address the most worrying trends we have observed in 2024. The current scenario of erosion of the legitimacy of the international architecture for the protection of human rights and the questioning of the effectiveness of international law in the wake of the genocide in Palestine is impacting the situation in Western Sahara. The UN General Assembly and also the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination have called in recent years to respect the commitment to the right of self-determination of the Sahrawi people, but still countries central to the process of conflict resolution, such as France, recently joined the dynamic led by the US, Israel and Spain to disregard international law and openly support the illegal occupation by force, both by force and plunder. And the return of Donald Trump to the US presidency raises fears of a new turn in this dynamic in the heat of the economic and commercial interests that exist between this country and Morocco. And also this double way of occupation, both military, by policing and administrative on the one hand and economic on the other, has intensified in an extreme way during 2024 to the point that in a relevant part of the over 100 violations included in this report, a direct link can be established between the victimizing acts and the commercial interests of concrete Moroccan companies such as the OCP and also international and European ones. Regarding civil and political rights, the report of the UN Secretary General to the Security Council on October 2024 warned that the situation of violations of human rights in Western Sahara is progressively worsening, which points to a growing narrowing of the civic space, and this trend is strongly confirmed by the present report, which lists over 100 human rights violations perpetrated this last year against the Sahrawi population in the occupied territory, with a particular viciousness towards human rights defenders, activists, and journalists. A good part of them are related to civil and political rights and take the form of arbitrary arrest, trials without guarantees, attacks on political freedoms, assembly, association, expression, coercion to free movement within the and outside the territory, and the total suppression of freedom of information. And all this happened, moreover, while Morocco held the presidency of the UN Human Rights Council. Among all the human rights violations reported, 56 are related to the general deterioration of the situation of the Sahrawi prisoners, who continue to be imprisoned despite successive opinions of the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. Morocco continues to use long sentences imposed in unfair trials as a means of punishing activists and their families, as our Hassan Abba was stating, in addition to subjecting them to a continuous dynamic of denial of basic rights, degrading treatment, and physical, psychological, and verbal abuse from the moment of the arrest and throughout the whole deprivation of liberty. In 2024, the Sahrawi prisoners have carried out 13 hunger strikes to denounce the conditions of their imprisonment, and I want to highlight especially the one launched by Abdel Jalil Darouzi on October 2024 after 3 weeks in a hospital in Rabat without receiving medical care. November saw the death in police custody of the Sahrawi citizen Omar Abdelmajid, who had been prosecuted for speaking out in favor of or against the occupation. And in addition to being beaten and arrested, the authorities avoided giving any information to his family of his whereabouts and condition for 4 days until they received a call from the hospital in El Ayoun communicating that he had received him already dead, and the circumstances and causes of Abdelmajid's death remain still unclear and have not been properly investigated or remediated. Also, arbitrary arrests and detentions have continued to be this last year a systematic reprisal against Sahrawi activists for their political activity, in many cases accompanied by police physical aggression and torture. And during this year, 14 persons have been arrested, detained, and hitting with particular ferocity young university students in Agadir, Sahrawi students in Agadir, as well as Sahrawi journalists. And in this sense, one of the most serious situations is the systematic harassment of the coordinator of Equipe Media, Mohamed Mayara, arrested and assaulted several times in this last year for his professional practice, nonetheless, as well as against other journalists like the RAS TV correspondent Sara Butangiza and others. Also, this is all accompanied by violent repression of protests and rallies in the streets, the coercion of freedom of movement, and also the prosecution of associations that want to be legalized or receive international and external funds as well. But one of the trends we are most worried about is the worsening of the economic, social, and cultural rights of Sahrawi people living in the occupied territories. That is already evident. On the one hand, Morocco is still deliberately ignoring the ownership of the Sahrawi population over their ancestral lands, expropriating and destroying their property. And the Sahrawi people suffers, in addition, a much higher rate of unemployment, lack of access to economic means, and repression of labor and union organization. And in many cases, they are not allowed to work in the much wanted mega projects and in the energy, agricultural, or fishing sectors that are exploiting their resources. Within this dynamic, there is an evident phenomenon of feminization of poverty, where the unemployment rate among Sahrawi women is over 50%, and those that are active in self-determination and human rights defense, or even those who have participated in a protest, face a situation of economic strangulation and almost immediate job discrimination, violations in the right to education and work, consisting, for example, in systematically denying university scholarships after obtaining a high school diploma, depriving access to jobs in the field in which they have graduated, and especially in liberal professions and skilled jobs. I want to highlight the case of Mohamed Ali, who continues to be banned from practicing law despite having graduated with distinction. On 27 June 2024, the Court of Cassation in Agadir upheld the decision of the Agadir Bar Association that perpetuates the arbitrary deprivation of his right of access to the practice of law on discriminatory grounds. And also, Morocco is rapidly expanding the use and consumption of land and water for agricultural cultivation for export and for the development of the tourism industry in areas such as Dakhla, and that comes with the harassment of the Sahrawi people in general and of activists and human rights defenders in this area, in the area of Dakhla, which Morocco plans to turn into a landmark of tourism, agricultural, commercial, and major infrastructure development, and has increased in a very serious way all the violations that are associated with this dynamic in the past year, in a way that it is becoming an unacceptable level of risk to ignore the likelihood that these dynamics will end leading to a covert eviction of the entire Sahrawi population in the area, mainly to prevent their existence and demands from becoming an obstacle for the investment of companies, multinationals, and tourist operators. At the beginning of September, there was a large-scale operation of unreported destruction of dozens of houses and huts owned by Sahrawi people in the area of Dakhla, and it is suspected that the aim of this operation was to clear the area for the construction of industrial estates associated with the activity of the new megaport of Dakhla, and that's only one of the many examples we have of this trend and this dynamic. And the destruction of housing in this region is a critical part of the demographic changes in the social structure of the Dakhla area, which is now proposing an eco-city focused on the design of places for citizenship and eco-environmental education for the population, while ignoring issues such as the repression of political protests in the public space or the use of greenwashing, and that is using environmental and ecological sustainability as an instrument to deepen the occupation. This dynamic of touristification and gentrification has resulted in an intensification of repression, especially focused on specific activists who are under constant surveillance, like 24/7 surveillance, and particularly relevant is the systematic harassment and persecution of Equipe Media journalist and human rights defender Hassan Zerwali, who was arrested in Dakhla in January and has been harassed from then up to now. Just to end, projection says that 2025 numbers can be way worse if no FP4 is done.